Okay, I'm going to mute everybody. As always, don't take it personally. We are honored to have with us Rabbi Menachem Posner from Chabad.org. We tried to have him about a month ago. Hashem had other plans, so we were very, very grateful that he was willing and able to join us here. So Rabbi Posner, thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to our weekly Zoom interviews. Thank you for taking time out of your schedule to be with us. Appreciate it.
I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, great. So let's get started. How long have you been with Chabad.org?
Okay, so first of all, this is Chabad. We don't keep such exact records, so I don't know. I think it's from 2007. I didn't really begin in any official capacity. The way it began was I was a student in Chabad Yeshiva in Brooklyn, and my friend said, Chabad.org needs some help. There's people emailing them questions, and do you mind going up during lunch and maybe answering some of those questions over email? I said, sure, why not? And so I would just go up during my lunch break and I would answer questions, and then one thing led to another, and eventually I guess maybe around 5 or 6 years later, I found myself working full-time at Chabad.org. So I don't know when I began, but it's something around 2006 or 2007.
Beautiful. Okay, so give us a sense of the breadth and depth and scope of Chabad.org. What is exactly Chabad.org? How many languages is it in? What does it provide for Chabad houses around the world? If you could give us a little bit of that kind of data, that would help us get a grasp on the scope of what Chabad.org is doing.
Well, my guess is that if probably many of you could tell me better than I can tell you what Chabad.org is, because I'm sure that we certainly aim to serve, like a Chabad house, serve everybody in their many Jewish needs, and we have different things for different people. So languages is simple enough. We have English, Hebrew, Spanish, Portuguese, French, German, Russian, Italian. We're launching Greek and Turkish, and probably another two that I forgot, maybe Polish, and I don't know what else. So that takes care of the languages. That actually has an answer. As we do, I think we've evolved somewhat over time, but we have a library of core texts, from Chumash to Rambam to Tanya that people can use. We have a constant stream of inspirational articles that we try posting. We have information that we also try to provide people, whatever Jewish information you might have, we want to be there for you. And I guess at the core of Chabad.org, and this may be less well known, but it's really the core. And this is actually the oldest part of Chabad.org, which existed before there was Chabad.org, because it existed before there was something called a website, before there was something .org or .com. It goes back to the late 1980s, and that is the Ask the Rabbi service, which people from all over the world, every single day in and day out, they contact us with whatever you might want to contact a rabbi about. And we have a dedicated team of rabbis and rebbitzins and mental health professionals who reply to those emails.
So let me ask you this. We see the staff. You're not a graduate of MIT. You didn't go to technical school. How do all these yeshiva bachrim, who are learning Talmud and Hasidus and Halacha all day, become so techno-savvy? I mean, the people here on the Zoom, we remember before there was internet, when sending an email was an accomplishment and you had to call your children. How did all of these yeshiva students become so well advanced to put out such a finished, complete product as Chabad.org?
So to be honest, I'm not so terribly savvy myself. I know what I need to know and I do what I need to do, but the programmers, they're really the guys who've got it all figured out. And this is their passion, this is what they're into. But I think that the biggest part of it is because they learn it because they need to know it, and they need to know it because they need to run a website. And they need to run a website because this is their way of serving Hashem and serving the Jewish people. And so it's automatic that they're going to have figured it out and they're going to do it well. So I guess that's how it happened. At least the first guys there, that's how they got into it. They said, there's a website here, we need to make it run, let's do it. And then they learned on the job.
So can you take us back, if you're familiar with the origins of Chabad.org? As we mentioned, we've all seen internet go from non-existent, literally non-existent, to the absolute centerpiece of our lives. The people who I know who are here are you all young? But even they remember before there was such a thing as an email address, before there was AOL, before there was 56K dial-up. And then all of a sudden this tool came about. Who, or if you know, can you give us a little bit of the background? Who identified that this had anything to do with teaching Torah? And how did it develop from those very earliest of days of the internet, before the iPhone, before everybody had it in their pocket, and become what it is today, as you listed off all those languages and they asked around, like, take us back. It can't have been that long ago.
Right. Okay, so the story of Chabad.org really begins with one person who was Rabbi Yosef Kazin, alav shalom, and he was actually the father of a friend of mine. And he was administrator of the yeshiva in Brooklyn, the Chabad yeshiva in Brooklyn. And being the kind of guy that he was, a tinkerer, he began to see if he could, computerize some of the yeshiva databases to streamline things. And he got into computers, and one thing led to another. And he realized, and this was in the late 1980s, that there were these message boards, and people were connecting on them, and they were asking questions. And he began to get very involved over there, answering people's questions, posting Jewish information, just being involved in this community, which I guess at that point was really, a very, very select group of, they probably bear the name with pride, nerds who were, in this little, society. And he was the visionary who began there. And then he really kept up with the developments, to the point that in 1994, this was just as the internet is beginning to blossom, he registers Chabad.org. It was within the first several hundred websites registered. So before New York Times, forget about before Google, this is the first few hundred websites in the world, which you realize means he could have been a trillionaire if he would have just chosen pizza.com, and he could have taken but he showed, we are Chabad, we are our organization. He wasn't greedy, didn't take Judaism, didn't take Jewish, just Chabad, that's all he needed, Chabad.org. And he began to use that as a platform to teach. And he had a really hard time because most people didn't understand what he was doing and didn't appreciate that this is going to be important one day. And there's this fascinating recording, which you can hear online. And he's speaking at the annual Kinus HaShluchim, the conference of Chabad Lubavitch emissaries. And I think this is in 1994 or 1995. And he's telling them, about what he's doing. And he's telling these shluchim, Rabbi, you may have been there, Rabbi Epstein. And he says, there's going to come a time that the people in your Chabad houses are going to come to me on the internet to study Torah. And people, what are you talking about? We're going to have classes on the internet. People are going to listen to classes and watch classes. And people thought he was nuts.
Next year, tell me there'll be a pandemic that'll close the whole world down for 8 months. That's ridiculous.
Yeah, so it really had to do with him. He was, and like you talk about people who were self-taught, he was the guy who was running it, but the guy who was doing the programming was actually his 13-year-old son, who was my buddy in yeshiva. So he was actually the programmer at the time, writing all the code. And he passed away, I think, in 1998 or 1999. And like I said, the core of this was the Ask the Rabbi service. And even on his bed in the hospital, as he was, battling illness, he continued to, on a laptop, and there was no wireless at that point either. So somehow he managed to hook up a phone line in his hospital bed, room, and continuously answering people's questions and answering questions till the end of his life. And then Chabad.org, even after he passed away, just continued to grow and evolve along with the internet. I mean, the way we all use internet has changed, and we've evolved along with you. Just one example that you could probably all relate to, and that is that several years ago, if you wanted to know a piece of information from a rabbi, you may have Googled Ask the Rabbi, found the Ask the Rabbi search, and then asked the rabbi your question. Now you won't do that though. You'll just Google the question yourself and let Google answer it for you. So our Ask the Rabbi team is still busy, but we're not answering the same questions, because the majority of the questions that we fielded 10 or 15 years ago or 20 years ago, you're not coming to us for, you're going straight to Google for. It's the next level of questions. If you aren't satisfied with what you've seen on the internet, or you need some reassurance that the internet can't provide you with, that you come to us. So there's a change, but everything's changing, and we're just changing right along with it.
So
So that's
when you say you have to ask the rabbi team, us, and so on, can you give us how many people are full time employed by this entity called Chabad.org, and what are some of the tasks? There's the technical side, I'm imagining, but on the front end, can you give us a scope of what we're dealing with now?
okay. So we're dealing with dozens, several dozen. So it's not 100, but it's many, many dozens. So the languages you could imagine, each language has, some of them are only part-time because there's, depending on the need. We'll have an editor who's putting up the information in that language. Some languages have a separate team of answering their Ask the Rabbi questions, depending on, again, the volume. You know, there are, let's just guess, I don't know, maybe 80,000 Portuguese-speaking Jews. So there's not that much. Spanish has many more. Hebrew has many, many more. English has the most. So depending on how many, there is the development team, which is the programmers who are always making fixes to the site and improving our system to keep things up and running. There's the editorial team, which I'm part of, which is producing new content and fixing the old content and soliciting content and editing and putting it up. We have the customer service people. One thing that we do, as a little secret here, is that a lot of Chabad centers don't host their own websites. Right? Beis Menachem's website, don't tell anybody, is a Chabad.org website, which we provide for them. But that means that we have thousands of customers who, there's a product. If Rabbi Epstein can't figure out how to tweak his Mincha Ma'ariv schedule on his website, he comes to our customer service representative.
That's where the mental health guys come in, right?
Right. They apologize very nicely, and I don't know.
You have therapy for.
Right, but that's so there's the whole separate team of that's serving the shluchim and their and their emails which we send out and their websites and all that. So there's all those different departments.
So when you mentioned about that, do you have a rough number? How many Chabad houses have what you've described as the template, the Chabad.org website? Is it 500? Is it 5,000? I mean, how many websites is Chabad.org operating concurrently?
It's funny because someone just posted the number, I think because we just hit a milestone, but I don't remember what that milestone was. It was certainly above 1,000, but I don't remember if it was 1,000 or 2,000 or something in that area.
Can you share with us what are some of the other websites besides Chabad.org that are sort of offshoots of Chabad.org? I know there's ones about the oil, that maybe some other ones.
Okay, so the primary subdivisions of Chabad.org that we have are, there's the JewishWoman.org, which posts things that are, I guess, more of interest to women, either because they're written by women or because, they're things that would interest women, which also has things like women's health and all that, but there's obviously a very blurry line between what belongs on the JewishWoman.org and what is Chabad.org content. But that's something that we have to work out. So there's JewishWoman.org. We have a news website which provides, I guess you could say, Jewish news with a Chabad angle or Chabad slant. Good news and otherwise. A classic example would be this week we had that horrific attack in Vienna. And so our team was right away in communication with the Chabad rabbis in Vienna, and we're able to report quite quickly on their knowledge, that in fact no Jewish institutions or Jewish people had been injured. In the beginning, it was thought that there would have been. So something like that. And then also, more positive, good news we're able to report when good things happen around the world. Always with a Chabad angle, or at least from our perspective. So there's the news, there's the women's site, there's Kabbalah Online, which began as a separate entity done by the staff of the Ascent, which is a very nice organization in Sfat, which teaches Kabbalah, and kind of a hostel and a Kabbalah center. And they merged with us, and we host their content. So that's Kabbalah Online.
Rabbi.org
Rabbi.org, which is a part of Chabad.org. I guess it's always been a part of Chabad.org. Every holiday, almost every holiday has its own domain. So you go to Passover.net, Hanukkah.com or whatever, but those are all parts of Chabad.org for all intents and purposes.
Do you have any tracking as to how many hits or how many people are accessing your websites monthly, weekly, daily? Do you have any way of measuring that?
We do. If you want, I can tell you. I can't tell you the full number, but I can tell you, for example, it's millions upon millions upon millions.
I can only imagine.
But I'm trying to look right now and see how many visits we got today. If you don't tell anybody,
I won't.
if I can find that information for you. Just give me a second. Sorry, my computer's not so quick when I'm also on Zoom.
Well, maybe I'll throw out another question while you're looking that up, and you'll be multitasking.
Okay.
We've been hosting. You got the number? Ding, ding, ding. We've been hosting these weekly interviews. Sometimes we get these fantastic stories we have from Chabad houses around the world. If somebody comes across this story, or somebody if they wanted to bring it to Chabad.org, what do they do? Do they email you? Do they call you? I mean, how would people who come across points of interest potentially get that attention of Chabad.org to prep it and so on? I mean, we've heard some stories from some Chabad houses. We had a story with Rabbi from Penn State about how his menorah was stolen and how he befriended the thief and so on. It was an amazing story. We're like, this story's got to be out there. So what would you recommend to people to do when they hear these kind of stories?
Okay, so I guess two things. First of all, our contact, go to Chabad.org, just to contact us or to ask the rabbi, it all goes to the same person. There's one wonderful person. His name is Chana Binyaminson. And she reads every single email that comes to Chabad.org. So whether it doesn't matter, she'll get it and she'll direct it to the right person, or because, we're among friends over, you could send it right to me.
Okay.
Posner at Chabad.org and I'll see it. So
Posner at Chabad.org. I mean, that just was one particular story from Herschel Harari at Penn State. I mean, it was so amazing. We were just stunned by it. And we said, this has got to be publicized. I mean, it was a beautiful story. It was just kind of a crazy story, but it was a beautiful story. So they want these to be lost.
Right now, and that is.
What are you mixing up there?
All right, I took notes. Now, about users, I will say, looking back right now, it looks like on a daily basis, we have, excluding the very busy times like Hanukkah and Pesach, but typical days, it looks like the traffic ranges between 150 to 200,000 per day.
Wow. I mean, except for Google or Wikipedia, it's election time. Maybe people are going to the New York Times and so on. But I mean, that's got to be more than they're going to look at baseball and all the other mishigas that's out there. How did Chabad.org and how do they maintain their being at the forefront of Jewish service on the internet? What is their sort of metric?
Okay, so we work quite hard on our SEO, which is our search engine optimization, which is we work hard to make sure that we are there for when you search. And so we have certain tools. For example, whenever I Google something on my computer, I have a little plugin that tells me how many other people Google those same terms. So I'm curious, let's say, for example, a couple months ago, did a little project in which I tried to figure out every animal. No one in the world Googles are lizards kosher. They're not. I'll tell you that. A lot of people, however, Google are zebras kosher. I don't know why, but this is the fact. So I did some research.
They're not, by the way. I'm a rabbi. I could tell you.
Okay, but us simple folk don't know why. I did some research to find out which animals people Google. Is this kosher? Is that kosher? Is the other kosher? Now I compiled a list of 150 animals, and not only that, some animals they Google. No one will Google is dog kosher. They will say are dogs kosher. On the other hand, zebra is zebra kosher. I don't know why. Some are plural, some are singular. So I got all that data, and then we went and wrote the answers for all those questions and posted them on their website. So it's about researching what people are looking for and what they need and trying to help them. But that's a really simple, small example of just almost just trying to one more thing people need. But it's really, whenever we write a page of content, is to think, what does this guy need right now? So I'm going to have a page on Shabbos candles. What do they need? Okay, they need the brachas. They need a drop of inspiration at the end. They need the information that went through. They need the candle lighting times. So try to, in every single page, put there what we think the user is going to need. And that's in every page we put. And by focusing on serving the user, which is everybody, and less on the means to, as we don't waste a lot of time on tricks and if we do it this way, Google will think this. But rather just think about the user and what the user needs. That is ultimately the best strategy, I believe, to being there. When Google recognizes good content, people are come here, they're sticking around, they're enjoying what they're reading, and then they send more people our way.
And in addition to reading, I know you have thousands of classes, audio classes, video classes. There's the Chabad.org/radio app that you can put on your phone, and it's like a radio. You put it on, you don't know what you'll get. You can get a song, you can get a lecture, and other things. What are some other ways that people who are watching us tonight, who may not be so familiar, might find access to or interest in the Chabad.org family of services?
Right. Okay. So first, right, like you said, we do have a lot of lectures and classes, including a lot by a certain Rabbi Epstein. Yes, he's probably one of our earlier contributors. You also are one of our first course presenters. Right. We have every month or two we have a course, which is kind of a 3 or 4 part series where you sign up and you join the course and you learn one subject or another. So if you want to learn a nice piece of Talmud in depth, you could do the Rabbi Epstein. So we have the courses, which is really good if you want to just tackle a specific area and really feel like you've gotten something at the end of it. So it's not just, watching a couple of lectures, but getting something. We have podcasts. So you can kind of go to wherever you get your podcasts, which if it's Spotify or wherever. I'm not a podcast person, but we do have those podcasts where you can get a lot of our lectures. And again, if you want video, it's Chabad.org/video. You want audio, it's Chabad.org/audio. It's all there.
So a lot of people are working from home now. Maybe you want something in the background. You don't want music. And if you're able to, or if you're at work and you can put in headphones or you're driving, you can tune in to Chabad.org through your phone. There's an app. There's a Chabad.org/radio app. And you know, like the radio, you don't know what you're going to get. You hit it and who knows what comes up 24/6. The Ask the Rabbi, the videos, you could no more having to waste your time listening to mindless talk radio. Chabad.org has so much for you to do. You could do your daily study sessions, chitas, et cetera, et cetera. Rabbi Posner, I want to thank you very much for joining us. Really appreciate it. Thank you for all the work that you're doing. And is there one more maybe quick story you could share that maybe illustrates the impact that Chabad.org has? Maybe it reached somebody in some remote city who knows what, doesn't have a Chabad house. It's his opportunity to be connected with Hashem. He's on Mars. Who knows where he is?
So I guess there's so many of them that eventually, I become kind of desensitized to it. Another person who told me, but there certainly are people all over the world who I've met, just a small portion of them, I'll guess one example that I really enjoy. There was a wonderful man in the city of Cork in Ireland, or as they say down there in Cork. And this man, he was the Mr. Jewish community of Cork. He was an older gentleman. He'd been born there. When he was a little boy, there was an active community with a shul. And by the time he passed away, the shul had dwindled to virtually nobody. And the last few years, he would import yeshiva students for the high holidays, have a minyan for the high holidays. And I took part in this wonderful program, which Chabad yeshiva students are, dispatched all over the world. And a friend of mine got to roam through Ireland, meeting Jewish people. And in the southern part of Ireland, this man, whose name was Freddie Rosehill, he was our partner. We'd come and he'd give us the contacts of all the Jews he knew in the area, because he took care of Judaism in the area. And when we would meet new people, we would pass out the contacts to him, because he'd take care of them for the rest of the year. He was Judaism in this part of the world. But he didn't. He was really isolated. He passed away, unfortunately, around 3 or 4 years ago, and we actually ran an obituary on Chabad.org for him. I thought it was important because he really was someone who gave so much to Yiddishkeit in his area. He had, I think, had one daughter who had intermarried and subsequently divorced. And he had these grandchildren who were Jewish grandchildren growing up in Cork, where there was no Jewish education whatsoever, none. But they were interested in learning about Judaism. And I met his grandson when he was a teen. And I, spoke to him and, what was your bar mitzvah like? So the mitzvah, I think, had been celebrated in the shul there. I can imagine they managed to scrape together a minyan for the bar mitzvah. And I asked him, so what did you learn for your bar mitzvah? Who taught you? There was no, I don't know if his grandfather could read. Who taught you anything down in Cork in Ireland? He said, I went to Chabad.org. Well, what do you? So, well, I saw on Chabad.org Tanya. I realized Tanya is an important book. So I made sure to study the entire Tanya in honor of my bar mitzvah. And I don't remember what else. I remember, like, this kid in Ireland, he read the entire Tanya. I don't know how many kids in West Rogers Park studied the Tanya. But, that was his bar mitzvah preparation, which he did all by himself on Chabad.org. And I know that there's a lot of others like him. I tried actually catching up with him a year or two ago, and I don't think I did. He went on a birthright trip. He went here, he went there. He's not a kid anymore. But so there's people all over the world just like that who really learned a lot and grown a lot with us, and it's inspiring for us.
Amazing. It's the combination of the quote from Pirkei Avos that everything that God created, He created for His glory. And here's the internet, which is, of course, we can waste so much time in nonsense and craziness. And here is Chabad on the forefront, showing that it's a tool and it can be used in the service of Hashem. And here's the vision of Mashiach saying, when the well springs are spread to the outside, it doesn't even require, under these circumstances when we can't be traveling and so on, look what the internet has done and what Chabad.org is continuing to do. So Rabbi Posner, thank you. 1,000 thank yous. We really appreciate it. Thank you for what you're doing. Thank you for sharing it with us. Thank you for informing us and giving us that sense. And we do want to encourage everybody, don't waste your time with talk radio or sports radio, whatever, when you're in the car or you're at home. There's music on Chabad.org too. If you want music, there's all forms of Jewish music that is there and all kinds of learning. And it's literally, if all the skies were parchment and all the seas were ink, you could not catch up to what the amount of data that Chabad.org has. So thank you for what you're doing. Thank you for bringing the Rebbe's vision and message to the entire world through these great tools that Hashem has given us. Remind everybody, tomorrow night, 9 o'clock, we're doing some Parsha Insights. And we want to thank Rabbi Posner so much for being with us. A good night, Yasher Koyach, and thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night, everybody.
Everybody here.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.